Firewalking. Firewalking is the act of walking barefoot over a bed of hot embers or stones or even lava. It has symbolic meaning for those on the spiritual path. The second degree is Purgatory, see our video Flames, Fire and Purgatory, and the final degree of the spiritual path is then Purification, see video Purification. Wikipedia states, Emil Durkheim attributed this effect to the theorized notion of collective effervescence, whereby collective arousal results in a feeling of togetherness and assimilation. This research suggests that there is a physiological foundation for collective religious rituals through the alignment of emotional states, which strengthens group dynamics and forges a common identity amongst participants. So their explanation is that it works because participants get excited. Although I suspect you would get excited too if you had to walk across burning embers. They then go on to assert, quite forcefully, Wikipedia, modern physics has explained the phenomenon, concluding that the amount of time the foot is in contact with the ground is not enough to induce burn. Combined with the fact that embers are not good conductors of heat. David Willey, Professor of Physics at the University of Pittsburgh at Johnston, points out that firewalking is explainable in terms of basic physics and is neither supernatural nor paranormal. Willey notes that most firewalks occur on coals that measure about 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, 538 degrees centigrade. But he once recorded someone walking on 1800 degree Fahrenheit, 980 degrees centigrade coals. We could find no references where David Willey had tested this theory out or indeed run experiments on coals this hot. But he did run an experiment. The experiment he ran, using him as the guinea pig, was made in midwinter, in temperatures so cold the filer was nearly out by the time he had taken off his boots. Friar Herbert Thurston, from The Physical Phenomenon of Mysticism. Dr. B. Glanville Corney, who was for many years the chief medical officer of the Fiji group, took a great interest in the form of firewalk over flagstones heated red hot. He writes on the subject as follows: I have seen the Fijian firewalk done 5 times, and I have examined the feet of several of the performers immediately afterwards, without meeting with any trace of injury or any trace of a protective application. On one occasion, a boy of 14 or 15 years, who was doing it for the first time, was unable to complete the journey round the hot stones in the pit, either from the heat or from the imperfect knowledge or skill in evading the risk. He hopped briskly out of the line of men onto the brim of the pit, and I examined his feet then and there. There was no injury whatever to be seen, though the stones were hot enough to have charred a pocket handkerchief into a frizzled, black ash in a few seconds, and some were still red hot on their undersides towards the middle of the pit. I cannot help thinking that some physical phenomenon takes place which has not been understood or explained. A parapsychological explanation. The parapsychological explanation is that this is just another example of psychokinesis, the action of mind on matter. In this action, objects, in this case the person themselves and the hot embers, are caused to move very slightly apart. In effect, the person levitates a tiny amount above the coals as a result of mental concentration. But the obvious question to be asked is how? And for an answer, we must turn to the quantum level. But first, another example. A. P. Elkin, from Aboriginal Men of High Degree. During one display in Western New South Wales, after the bull roarer had been swung, thus creating a mystic atmosphere, the men present were told to sit around and stare into a big fire on the sacred ground. As they stared, they saw a clever man roll into the fire and scatter the coals. He then stood up among the rest of the men, who noticed that he was not burned, nor were the European clothes that he wore damaged. The informant and the others were quite satisfied the doctor was in the fire. In 1944, some Vaiovan men told me that they had seen this same doctor walk through the fire naked and unhurt. Aborigines on ceremonial occasions are able in their excitement to stamp on and scatter the burning coals of a fire without any apparent harm. And novices in initiation are sometimes tossed into a big smoke fire. But these displays of fire rolling and firewalking were thought to go further. Thus, one of the absolutely key requisites is very, very high emotion. The generation of so much emotion that the conscious self is made still, ego goes, memory no longer chatters, and the route is opened for a spiritual experience. The forces of attraction and repulsion. At the quantum level, all that exists are objects, also called atoms with a U. The objects form into aggregates. See the video Aggregates. And each aggregate has its own centre, the point about which everything clusters. Thus, a human being, formed as it is from numerous sub-aggregates, nevertheless has its unique centre around which the functions of the unique human mind cluster. Each human being is formed by millions, if not billions, of invisible lines or links of attraction between objects. They are immensely strong lines, and so give the impression we are a solid object. But as we well know, the links are not that strong, as we lose bits of us on an hourly basis. Hair, skin and cell objects fall away from us, to be replaced by new hair, skin and cell objects derived from food objects. Meanwhile, we walk through the very loosely connected gases we call air, but have to navigate around other aggregates formed from objects connected by strong lines of force. There are also forces of repulsion, and levitation involves ramping up these forces, so that our aggregate of closely attracted objects is more repulsed than it would normally be by another aggregate. Too much, and we would rocket into the air out of control. But ramp up those forces of repulsion just enough, and we eliminate or negate the functions of the other object. So in firewalking, this is what our mind is doing, using high levels of energy to negate gravity, the force of attraction, and replace it by a repulsive force just strong enough to keep the objects of the fire and embers from invoking our function to burn. In effect, fire's ability to burn the body is negated because the links between all the objects making the embers and all the objects making you are weak, somewhat like the repulsive effect of the poles of a magnet. So just like a mobile phone, if the signal is weak, the message doesn't get through.